Continue now with the internal challenges to Hinduism, and I am on click 128, 27 or so. And what you have there now is going to be, I describe Jainism. Now I am going to describe Buddhism and how Buddhism became a challenge to Hinduism and is still one of the greatest challenges to Hinduism. Now, I would highly recommend, and I posted the book in the Prezi, a book by Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse was a Nobel Prize winner of literature, and he wrote several books that are quite quite exemplary of an early 20th century European thinker who is completely and utterly disillusioned with secularism and the death of God and the emptiness of materialism. So he sought wisdom in the East, and he decided to write a novel called Siddhartha. Now, Gautama Siddhartha was the actual name of the Buddha. And this book, even though it does not stay with the chronology of the book or of the life of the Buddha or the historical details of the life of the Buddha, it tries to define the essence of Buddhism exemplified in Siddhartha. So let me explain to you how Buddhism arose in the midst of this. What you have is Gautama Siddhartha, which is the Buddha, and the Buddha was born in a Kshatriya family. His father was a king, and he was expected to be a king. I'll go into more detail when we get to Buddhism. Long story short, what happens to the Buddha is he has a lovely bride and wife, and she is pregnant and had a baby, and the name of the baby was Rahula. And he is said to have a very successful career. His father was a successful king. It was now his job to expand the kingdom beyond what the father had done. And all of a sudden, during his life, he was protected from suffering. Now, the reason why the father literally kept him in the palace, served by young people, not sickly, not elderly, not dead people. He was not acquainted with that level of suffering. And so he was kept from seeing suffering because when he was born, there was a prophecy about him. He was going to be a turner of the wheel. And you will see that in the press as to what that wheel looks like. But a turner of the wheel can come out in two senses. There are two kinds of people that revolutionize the world. One is going to be those who are engaged in politics and military conquest. And so that was the father, a Kshatriya. And they can alter the world like Alexander the Great and Napoleon and many others. The second path is going to be that of religion. And so now here you have your son, which is professed to be a turner of the wheel. You are a king, and the dharma obligation of your son is going to be a king. And your best wishes for him is to be a king. So the best way to stop a person from reflecting about the meaning of life is by removing them from pain and suffering, because our natural response to old age, sickness, and death is to be quite surprised by it when we see it, when we witness the first death of a human being. That is a memory that remains with us. When you see sickness to the point of utter debilitation, and that remains in our minds. And so what happens to the Buddha is that he's not the Buddha yet. What happened to Siddhartha is that he was early in his 30s, quite successful, beautiful wife and a child. Everything was going great for him. Well, he was kind of dissatisfied about life. He had never been outside of the kingdom without the parental guidance and premonitions and so on. And so what he did is that he sneaked out the first night. And as he was going around in the night, he encountered old age, and he was utterly disturbed by it. I don't know if you can see that in pictures of people that were youthful and beautiful, and then when they get to old age, then you realize that any semblance of beauty externally has been completely removed. When you look at the best looking people in the 1970s and 80s, and now you look at them in the 2018, 2019, and you kind of cringe at it. Arnold at one point had the perfect physique. You look at Arnold today, and that's far from anything that you would see as admirable. So he saw old age, and he was utterly disturbed by it. If another human being experiences old age, that means I will experience old age. That means my wife will experience old age. That means my children. And then, so he cannot get the thought out of his mind. He's quite perturbed by it. The second night comes about. He goes and does the same thing, goes out. And then now he sees sickness and the frailty of sickness. And the deplorable state in which a human being can be brought to, and how unsanitary and painful it can be. And again, he was utterly distraught by it. He did not know how to account for it. It seems that after a person sees things like that, they should require an answer as to how to make sense of it. If not, then how do you go on with your life pretending that that is not happening to you and to others, and that everybody that you know will grow old and sick? On the third night, he goes out and then he sees death, physical death. Somebody whose life has stopped and ceased, and now he is utterly perplexed by this. He does not know. His soul is in complete turmoil. Think of Arjuna, when Arjuna saw the consequences of what he had to do and his relatives across the river, and who he had to kill, and then his mind was in a whirlwind. He couldn't make sense of it. And so now that he has these three things, he begins to see old age, sickness, and death everywhere. He saw a farmer, one of his employees, if you want, or subjects, who was tilling the ground. Now you can imagine how many things are being broken into and killed when you have your mules or animals that are building trenches and having to rip the ground open, and all the worms and all the animals that die. And then he starts seeing that there is pain and suffering everywhere. So his soul is utterly in distraught. All the things that were given to him, his kingdom, his wife, his child, all of those things lost any meaning, because unless he found an answer to these problems, existence was something difficult to endure. And so he decides to go out again. And on the fourth night, he sees a sage, or a Hindu that is meditating. And he saw him in the lotus position, and he saw the peace and harmony that was upon his semblance. And he was young. He was in his mid-20s or so. And so Siddhartha realized, I want that. I want that peace of mind. I want to be able to be steady in the midst of this turmoil. I want to be able to transcend ordinary existence. I want to reach that state of being. How can he have so much peace and I be in turmoil? And then the other aspect is nobody had taken the care to explain these things to Siddhartha. His father didn't have answers. His advisors didn't have answers. And so now you have this young person who is meditating and setting a pattern or a path by which he now can pursue. Now, I will stop the story there for Siddhartha just to illustrate what is coming now. Siddhartha is going to pursue the path of liberation by new means. He is going to abandon the Varna Ashrama Dharma system. He is going to abandon the conceptions of Hinduism and the Vedas. He is going to side with the Jainists, questioning the relevance of the Vedas or the legitimacy. He is going to set aside the caste system as being superfluous and man-made. He is going to now engage in the process of self-discovery as if he was a sannyasi after having completed all his responsibilities. So what you have here is a complete and utter departure from Hindu tradition. And you do away with the caste system, and you do away with Hinduism. I mean, practically speaking, the caste system is the essence of the Varna Ashrama Dharma system. That is the whole legal structure and cultural structure by which a Hindu is able to function. So you do away with that, and you do away with Manu and the laws of Manu and the divine inspiration of the document. you are pretty much tearing Hinduism apart. And so the Buddha is now continuing his path, and I'll let you know what happened to him later as we get to Buddhism. But in the meantime, he became extremely successful, and Buddhism went from there to China, to Southeast Asia. From Southeast Asia, then it spread to North America and California, and then Phoenix, and now it's all over the world with over 500 million people who departed from the Hindu traditions. The Buddha Siddhartha was Hindu, and he departed from it. So this is quite a significant challenge that still remains today, and and the Hindus have tried to respond to the challenges of Buddhism by incorporating the Buddha into the incarnations of Vishnu. So the truths that the Buddha is professing are truth revealed to humanity by Vishnu as one of its incarnations, and therefore the Buddha is just one more path to the divine. But nonetheless, that hasn't sufficed, and the contention between Buddhists and Hindus still remains till today. One of the most difficult things for a Hindu father is to marry a daughter with a Buddhist because a Buddhist is undermining the tradition. So I will stop there, and then I will go on into the West and Islam and Christianity.